everybody who's come before the committee today and for giving us your time. Today's theme of self-advocacy and women with disabilities is an important consideration for the committee. The Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities is about providing a rights-based approach to disability. But this is a two-sided coin because it's about empowering people to understand and exercise their rights, but it's also about increasing government and state accountability to respect, protect and fulfil rights. I welcome the strong points made in the opening statements that self-advocacy is a complex area and that it should not be an additional burden placed on disabled people, especially women. The state needs to put in place structures to facilitate and foster self-advocacy, be that for individuals or for DPOs. My first questions are for Disabled Women Ireland. I was struck by the content of your opening statement that advocacy can place the burden for access on each individual disabled person's shoulders, and that can involve very real dangers for the individual advocating. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on those points for the committee. I think words like advocacy and empowerment can be too easily deployed without kind of fully considering their implications. You also stress the importance of DPO funding and capacity building, which you describe as currently being largely tokenistic and unlikely to affect real change. My understanding of DPOs and their vital function has been transformed by discussions at this committee, and I know there's still a lot of work to be done by the state in recognising and really promoting this model. Could you explain what the state should be providing in terms of financial and other support to be compliant with the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities as outlined in General Comment 7? And then for Inclusion Ireland, I'd also be eager to hear your comments on what the state needs to do to support the development of DPOs. Your explanation of advocacy as relationship was striking, especially in terms of people who might find it challenging to express themselves verbally. Can you express the type and scale of work that goes into developing this form of advocacy? And Una, you talked about why it's important to have information in a way you can understand and more easy to read information and videos to help make informed decisions. I was just wondering if you could tell us why that's important. And finally, for Eliona, you rightly chose to discuss gender-based violence, and that's an unfortunate reality. We always have to discuss on International Women's Day, or International Women's Week, maybe I should say today, the day after. You explained the reality that disabled women are at higher risk of experiencing domestic violence than non-disabled women. Would you have suggestions for immediate measures that can be taken to address gender-based violence, particularly regarding disabled women? Thank you.
Okay. Will we start with Ilona first, and then to Amy, Nim, and then to Derval or Una? So, in that order, if that's okay? Eliona?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. There's multiple ways, and there's a lot of research internationally across Europe or across the globe. So I would say first and foremost is to collect the voices of disabled women. And when I say voices, I don't only mean speech. I mean people with different communication skills. We need to hear their stories and learn from their stories and learn from their experiences, because if I share something, I am sure that I will empower someone else across different corners of Ireland to share their experience or to identify with my experience. So I would say an immediate action will be funding research to get across Ireland and collect those stories, collect those experiences, but not just of voices of disabled women, together with the experiences of police, of experiences of the current legal justice as we know. I mean, that is not the only justice disabled women want, but in order to understand how to address gender violence, we need to combine the voices of disabled women together with the experiences of people who support reporting, investigation and prosecution of gender-based violence, let that be on different forms, be it domestic, be it in congregated settings, be it in support services, and so on and so forth. So I would say that. Another one would be, which Article 33 of CRPD calls for states to collect statistics. So we always go on assumed numbers of either disabled people in Ireland or across the globe, but we need proper statistics. We need recent statistics on disabled people, on disabled women, issues that concerns our lives, issues that concerns our inclusion and participation into practices, policies, and laws. And if the government is willing to provide the funding, I'd be willing myself to provide that or go ahead and do that research. And of course, together with other women from DWI and other NGOs and DPOs across Ireland. So hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy?
Yes, thank you. Just as one sort of brief point or add on to Eleona's points around gender-based violence. Absolutely, research and statistics are super important, and we would absolutely advocate for increasing funding and sort of starting to work on that. I also think there's two other points that I would add into that based on we recently submitted to the European Union on gender-based violence and how it's experienced by disabled women. I think what's also really important to include is that the support services that are currently there for women and non-binary people and anybody who is experiencing gender-based violence, they need to be made accessible, and they're not currently accessible. And if you want something really structured that we can do in a really short period of time, it's to conduct an accessibility audit, make resources available to make those supports accessible, and accessible in the broadest sense of the word. It's not just about not having a step into the front door, it's ensuring that people who are neurodivergent are properly supported, and people have equality training and equity training and unconscious bias training to support individuals who are coming into those centres. I also think another really concrete short-term thing that we could actually do is start working on financial independence for disabled women and non-binary people. We've spoken about this at the committee before, but we've spoken about things like means testing of disability payments. We've talked about how financial dependence is a major risk factor, or at least complicates experiences of gender-based violence, and how disabled people are at increased risk of being financially and otherwise dependent on individuals close to them, and the barriers that creates for people who want to leave dangerous and abusive situations. So I think those are things that we could, in addition to research and statistics, data collection, I think we could start working on those in a really sort of short-term capacity. In terms of the resources that are needed by DPOs, and I don't think we addressed the resources that are needed for new and upcoming DPOs. So I'll speak to both of those. To sort of reiterate what I was saying earlier, financial resources are incredibly important. We need resources to be able to pay people for the time that they are spending. We need to make sure that people that we can create systems that are accessible. So we need money for online infrastructure, but also in-person meetings, and ensuring that those events of all forms are accessible. We also need capacity building. So whether that's providing resources to us that we can go out and get that training elsewhere, or whether the state provides that itself, that's something that probably needs to be discussed in greater detail. But we need that capacity building. We need to know what we need to be writing, what we need to be looking at, and how we interact with policy and legislation. We need that capacity building piece. And then the state needs to ensure that essentially all of its consultation is done in an accessible way. And I absolutely agree with Derval that we need to start moving towards a co-creation sort of space. But those are the things that are needed. In terms of new and upcoming DPOs, we would always sort of support the creation of more DPOs. There are an awful lot of areas and different intersecting identities that are not currently directly covered by a DPO, a national DPO in Ireland, and we would absolutely be in favour of more DPOs forming. to be super clear. In terms of what's needed, we need greater awareness of what a DPO is and greater awareness of how to create one. And if that means, individuals who are interested in forming a DPO are given support to get in contact with existing DPOs, we're entirely in favour of that, but we need support in order to be able to meet that, right? We're already struggling to keep up with the demands that are being placed upon us. So ensuring that support and resources and information are available will be things that I would say are quite important.
Okay, thank you. Una?
Accessible information. I like to get support with information so I can understand it. My speech today is in plain language. I think everyone should use words that are easy to understand.
Thank you very much. Nim?
Thank you. So I'll just briefly add on to Amy's point and just highlight we seem to be unable to connect dots. So on one side we're talking about disabled women's inequality of educational attainment and access, but we don't make the dots that means that when we're trying to advocate and form DPOs, we have fewer people who have knowledge of corporate governance, who have knowledge of GDPR. We also need access to training on those things to be fully empowered and fully self representative and regulating. So I just want to kind of highlight, in relation to gender-based violence, a couple of issues. So we have highlighted that the majority of gender-based violence experienced by disabled women and girls and non-binary people is from their caretakers and family members. And that is not currently, there isn't currently sufficient provision in law to capture those relationships. We don't have equal protection under the law. But the financial dependency, to put it in real terms, we are speaking to women who are saying that they can't wait until they turn 66 years old so that they can come into the state pension, so that they can leave a spouse who's been abusing them every day for 40 years. Financial dependency isn't an abstract concept. This person is entirely dependent on their abuser to eat, to get out of bed, to access medication. This is urgent. Every day that we continue to link disabled people's rights to the people around them, disabled people's ability to literally survive to the people around them, we are leaving them facing abuse every single day. We can't keep dragging our heels on this or thinking that it's quite an abstract budgetary condition. This is literally, we need to empower disabled people to be individuals, to stand on their own 2 feet or roll on their own 2 wheels. I'm just very passionate about this. And I think that we really need to connect those dots and actually start viewing not just the kind of academic reading off a page, oh, disabled women experience this and experience that. And no disabled woman who is trapped in a home with abuse is going to be able to advocate at all. We need to be giving them the tools to escape the situation they're currently in before we can be expecting them to advocate or consult or anything else. The onus is on us, not on the people that are most marginalised and experience the most vulnerability. In terms of kind of the burden of access on the individual and the burden of advocacy on the individual, this is also something that we're quite cautious about. So of course we are advocates. We are absolutely in favour of empowering everyone to advocacy, but we're also absolutely want to make it clear that advocacy is hard. Advocacy takes a lot of learning, and it's a skill that needs support and energy and time to exercise. It cannot be demanded of every single disabled person just because they're a disabled person. We're also speaking to people who kind of trying to support our members who are encountering obstacle after obstacle. For example, disabled students at 3rd level who have to go and ask every single lecturer and another faculty member before every single module of every single course every single year to explain their reasonable accommodations and request that those be upheld, because let's be honest, it is at this stage a request. We do not have robust enough statutory support for that, and the nominal fee, the nominal cost of reasonable accommodation is very unclear and very difficult for a disabled individual to stand over and demand. What is a nominal fee? How do they argue with someone refusing accommodation that theirs doesn't fall under that? Because nominal